There's a moment I keep coming back to. I was maybe 9 or 10, and my mum was standing at the kitchen counter going through the mail. She opened one envelope, read it, and then just set it face down. Didn't say anything. Went back to chopping the lotus root for soup. I asked her what it was. She said, "Nothing. Go do homework." It wasn't nothing. I know that now. But the way she said it, calm, final, like a door clicking shut, that was its own kind of lesson. Don't ask. Don't look. Keep moving. We weren't poor by the time I was growing up. My parents had worked themselves out of the early years, the years I only know from the stories they half tell. My dad driving a delivery truck 14 hours a day. My mum doing alterations out of our living room until 11 at night, charging $30 a hem because that was what the neighborhood would bear. By the time I was in middle school, we had a house. A used Camry that ran fine. We ate well. My mum cooked every night, proper meals, nothing from a box. Because restaurants were for special occasions, and special occasions were maybe twice a year. So we weren't poor, but we were absolutely terrified of being poor again. And here's the thing I didn't understand until I was in my late 20s, sitting in my apartment with a decent salary and a 401k I'd never actually looked at. Those two things aren't the same. Growing up without money leaves marks on your bank account. Growing up scared of losing money leaves marks on how you think. There's a term for this in behavioral finance, scarcity mindset. But the clinical language kind of flattens it. It's not just that you worry about money sometimes. It's that your nervous system learned at a very early age that financial stability is provisional, that it can be taken, that looking too closely at the numbers is somehow tempting fate, that if things are fine right now, you don't say so out loud because you might jinx it. My mum literally knocks on wood when anyone mentions that business has been good. She's been doing it my whole life. The specific way this showed up for me was spending, not reckless spending, the opposite. I would get anxious about spending anything that felt like it was for me. Necessary things, fine. But something I actually wanted? I'd put it in my car and leave it there for a week. I'd feel guilty buying a $28 moisturizer. I'd tell myself I was being responsible, being smart, honoring what my parents sacrificed. But I was also running a $47,000 emergency fund in a savings account earning 0.01% interest because the money felt safer where I could see it, even though safe was quietly costing me. I wasn't making a rational financial decision. I was making a scared one. And I kept confusing the two. When I think about where my parents' fear came from, I mean really think about it, I stop feeling frustrated with them and start feeling something that's harder to name. My dad came here in 1989 with about $800 and the phone number of a cousin he'd met once. He didn't speak English. The financial system here wasn't explained to him. It was something he figured out by watching other people, by trial and error, by getting taken advantage of a few times first. He didn't open a bank account for 2 years. He kept cash in the house because he'd grown up in a place where banks could freeze your money, where the government had once just changed the value of the currency overnight. His skepticism wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition, built in a completely different context that never fully updated when the context changed. My mum grew up watching her parents count coins on the table before deciding if they could afford protein that week. The idea that you would put money into something called a retirement account. Money you couldn't touch for decades, that existed only as numbers on a screen, administered by a company with an American name she didn't fully trust. That wasn't irrational fear. That was rational fear that had followed her across an ocean and hadn't been given a reason to leave. She used to say, "Keep money close, don't let strangers hold it." She meant it practically. I absorbed it as a rule about life. So there I was at 28, with a good job in healthcare administration, contributing just enough to my 401k to get the employer match and not $1 more. And with that absurd pile of cash sitting in a savings account at Chase like a security blanket, I couldn't bring myself to put down. A co-worker. This woman, Priya, who was incredibly blunt in a way I now deeply appreciate, just looked at my situation one day when we were talking about finances and said, "You know, that's just fear, right? Dressed up like caution?" She wasn't wrong. I hated that she wasn't wrong. So I started, slowly, to actually look. Not overhaul everything overnight. I tried that once and it lasted 4 days. I opened the Fidelity app and actually read what my 401k was invested in. It was sitting almost entirely in a money market fund. I don't know how it got there. I think I made some default selection years ago that I didn't understand and then never revisited. That money had barely grown. I spent about 2 weeks reading. Not a course, not a guru, just the actual fund descriptions, some NerdWallet articles, a few Reddit threads. And then I increased my contribution to 15% and moved my allocation to a target date fund. A 2061, because that's roughly when I'll retire. It took maybe 45 minutes of actual action after years of paralysis. Then I opened a Roth IRA. I'd been eligible for years. I kept telling myself I'd do it when I understood it better, which was a lie I told myself so I didn't have to feel scared. I opened it through Fidelity because I already had the account, contributed $500 just to start. Not the full $7,000 for the year, just enough to make it real, and put it in an S&P 500 index fund. Done. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't a plan born from deep financial wisdom. It was just a beginning. The emergency fund I kept. 6 months of expenses, high yield savings account now, at least. But I let go of the extra $22,000 that was sitting there past any reasonable definition of emergency. Some of it went into the Roth. Some of it went into a brokerage account. It felt like loosening a grip I'd been holding for years without noticing my knuckles had gone white. I called my dad after I did it, not to ask permission, but I think partly to mark it somehow. I told him I'd opened a Roth IRA and moved money into investments. There was a pause. He said, "You trust this company?" I said I thought so. He said, "Okay, good." Another pause. "You eat already?" That was it. That was the whole conversation. But I think something shifted in it. Not his fear. That's his, and it makes sense for his history. And I'm not trying to overwrite it. Something in mine. I was making a choice based on what I actually knew about my actual life, not based on a 9-year-old's memory of a letter being placed face down on a counter. The scarcity was real for them. For me, the scarcity became a story I inherited. And you can honor the story. You can understand exactly where it came from and why it made complete sense, without letting it run your finances in 2025. I'm still working on it. There are still weeks where the anxious math starts up at 2 a.m. and I'm mentally calculating worst-case scenarios for no reason. But I at least know now what's mine and what I inherited. That's not nothing. If this hit close to home, you're not alone. And you're not stuck repeating it. Subscribe for more stories about money, family, and the quiet patterns that shape how we live. See you in the next one.